If you haven't already checked out part 1 of a Human Design Manifestor, you can do that right now. But if not, let's get started and talk about the human design strategy a manifestor can use to get the most fulfillment out of their life. In part 1, we talked about what a manifestor was and how all manifestors have an undefined sacral and a motorized throat. We also mentioned the theme of anger and also how manifestors are here to initiate all the other types, that they work alone, and how their energy works. Now let's talk about the human design strategy for a manifestor. So what exactly is a human design strategy? Strategy is unique to human design. Your strategy comes from your type, and it's the most important knowledge offered by human design because it gives key information about every type and how they operate in the world. It can help you make decisions in your life and also recognize when you're on the right path. And since all 5 types have different strategies, a manifestor strategy is unique to a manifestor. And like I've said in all my videos before, whatever information I give is all up to you. You can use it or you can ignore it because human design is all about experimenting what works for you. There are people who will say that you need to follow a lot of rules and regulations, to follow everything according to your type, to never color outside the lines because if you do, there could be a lot of trouble coming your way. And to that I say, you have a choice, experiment or not. So if you're interested in experimenting and finding out what a strategy for a manifestor is, then let's check it out. As I already said in part 1, manifestors are all about just doing it. So the strategy is they think about what they want to do, they inform, and then if they're emotionally defined, they wait for their emotional wave, then act. But if they're not emotionally defined, then they just do whatever they want to do after they've informed those impacted. So a scenario could be a manifestor decides they want to go on a trip. And since they're not emotionally defined, they don't have to wait for clarity. But since they're married, they inform their spouse about what they plan to do. And then they go ahead and do it. And that's how a strategy would work. So we just talked about how a strategy would work for a manifestor who wasn't emotionally defined. But what if they were emotionally defined? And what is an emotional wave? If someone is defined emotionally, or they have a brown triangle on the right-hand side, then that means they have an emotional wave. And because they have an emotional wave, that affects their strategy. And what that means is that when you're undefined emotionally and a decision comes up, you should act in the moment and make the decision. But if you're defined emotionally and a decision comes up, the theory is that you're supposed to wait for your emotional wave to make a decision, or in the case of the manifestor, to act on an idea. So what does it mean to have an emotional wave? In human design, the emotional wave is described as all the range of emotions and feelings a person cycles through before returning to the beginning. So for instance, you wake up in the morning and you're feeling happy, everything looks amazing, and you're just in a great mood. By lunchtime, you're starting to feel a little bit lower. You're not down, but you're just feeling a little bit less elated than you were in the morning. By dinner time, you feel melancholy. You want to be alone, you don't want to talk to anybody, and you just want to close the door and ignore the world outside. Then you go to bed and the next morning you feel on top of the world again. Now, of course, most times emotional waves are not that quick, but it's just an example of what an emotional wave looks like. And everybody who's defined emotionally will have their own way of expressing their emotional wave. Some people have it for hours, some people have it for days, and some people even have it for weeks. And for more details, just check out my emotional center video. But for the purpose of this video, and how it affects the strategy of a manifestor. When a manifestor is emotionally defined, they need to go through a complete emotional wave before they find clarity on if they want to act on something they've decided on or not. And what that means is that they can have an idea and it might feel really good in the moment, and they go ahead and act and create something or initiate something, only to find out halfway through that they don't really want to do it after all, and it doesn't feel good anymore. But now that they've initiated, they're kind of stuck. Most people who have an emotional wave will be able to relate to that story, where you say yes right away and then later on regret it. So the question is, how do we know when something's right for us? If you have an emotional wave, the way to get clarity, to know if it's right for you or not, is to wait for your emotional wave. So for a manifestor, they have an idea of something they want to do, and it feels really good and it feels like it's the right thing to do. But instead of just going ahead and doing it, it's better to wait until they've gone through their full emotional wave to decide if it continues to feel right. And if through the whole wave they still think it's a good idea, then they should just go ahead and do it. But if there's doubt or the feeling that it may not be the right thing for you, it might be better to let it go rather than wasting time and energy for something that you may not even want to do anymore. So, how does a manifestor even know what's right to initiate? Because by their nature, they're not meant to be told what to do by anybody. And that can be the piece where some manifestors struggle to find out what's right for them. And because of this, that's why it's important for manifestors to be in touch with their own inner guidance. And how they do that is completely up to them. There are manifestors who use astrology, meditation, a spiritual practice, divination cards, or divination of any kind, or any creative act. It doesn't really matter how they do it, only that they do it so that they can find the guidance that they need. Otherwise, their initiating can look like throwing a dart at a bullseye blindfolded. So now that we know what a strategy for a manifestor is, it seems pretty simple. But the only problem with the strategy for a manifestor is that it's really not in their nature to inform anybody about what they're doing. In fact, there are probably very few manifestors who don't have stories about being a child and running away from home because they couldn't be told no anymore, or how they became super secretive because they were tired of people trying to control what they did and didn't do. Manifestors' energy is very lively, and it's all about just doing what they want, being curious about the world around them, and many times doing things that scare parents. But according to human design, the nature of a manifestor is here to explore, where most times the risks they take when they're exploring don't turn out to be a huge catastrophe. So with this history in place, the concept of a manifestor informing other people what they're going to do may take a little time to adapt to. But if they experiment and try it out, they might discover that it works really well. Knowing your type is just the beginning of the information a body graph will show you. But I'm going to stop here for now and let you digest what I've talked about. And make sure to check out my other videos where you can learn more and more information about human design, the body graph, and all about you. Because when we truly know who we are, life just gets easier.